Everybody, good evening and welcome to what I hope is going to be an enjoyable hour and a half, but it's certainly going to be a very different style of community conversation than you've had in the past. This is your opportunity to focus on a single area of interest, which is the future of your high streets. My name is Paul Clement. I've been asked to facilitate the event. And although over the years I've worked a number of times for both Wandsworth and Richmond councils, I'm not from your area and therefore I am impartial and also independent. My role is to keep the discussions flowing and to give you some context beforehand as to what's going on, not just across your high streets, but across high streets in the country. And if you look at the bottom of your screen and you hover the cursor over the button that says chat, there for the whole period of time sits your opportunity to raise questions, which I'll be asking your councillors in the last 20 minutes or so of this evening's conversation. So please either type question and I will ask you to field the question. If you prefer, type the question itself and I'll ask it on your behalf. And my job then will be to act as David Dimbleby and make sure that your councillors respond to your queries. But let's stick with the main business to start with, which is an introduction to your councillors. So to start with, we're joined by Councillor Baker, who's the lead member for Economics and Business. Councillor Baker, for you to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Paul. And really, I just wanted to say that this is an opportunity perhaps to have a look at our own high streets and see what we're looking for and how we're using them, what we're doing with them, and whether they can be improved and how they can be improved. So this is an opportunity, as well as raising your other issues that you want to raise locally with your own local councillors, to at least give some thought to the high street as well. I'll pass you back to Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And we're also joined by three other councillors, Councillors Penny Frost, Andre Fries and Gareth Richards. And two of those will now give you updates on the wards. So to start with, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Frost. Councillor Frost, the floor is yours.
Good evening, thank you very much. Well, this is just a very quick update on some items which aren't coming up later in the agenda. So I thought you might be interested to know that with regard to Teddington Lot, for instance, the funding for the refurbishment of Teddington Lot, which is much needed, has been secured. We're still waiting for a date for that work to start. It's clearly not going to be in this financial year now, but that will be coming along in the future. We're going to be seeing that the fencing that's been up protecting the island, that looks like it's being dismantled now. Of course, that's Environment Agency, the island, and the fencing was put up because of the dangerous jumping from the lock footbridge at the time that of the hot weather in the summer. I think we had hot weather in the summer. Certainly there were young people jumping in. And I don't know whether you've noticed, but we have had parks patrols regularly coming along onto the lock and just ensuring safety Friday evenings and weekends. And they've been very faithfully doing that, which is good. For us Verges, the council had this policy for allowing some of the Verges to grow for biodiversity. I think everyone was taken by surprise at the speed with which the grass grew because of the curious weather conditions that we've had this summer. That policy is obviously being looked at because there have been, certainly around in Ham and Petersham, there are Verges which where if they grow too high, then it's very hard for our local residents to get between their car and their front door. So that has to be looked at. But otherwise, you know, we do like to see the potential for good biodiversity coming up there. I think Councillor Fries is going to talk a little bit more about the work that's been done on Church Road leading to Handgate, but we've had some emergency double yellow lines put in along Hamgate Avenue during the time of the sort of the massive parking that was being experienced while the gates were being closed, and then after the reopening. We are consulting now on whether double yellows will be kept there, because we know that the parking charges will be coming into the park before too long, and that is going to affect the number of vehicles which are likely to be looking for parking in and around that area. I mean, the parking itself wouldn't be a problem if it was not obstructing emergency vehicles getting up and down, because it's not really a space for two-way. I'm going to stop talking there and hand over to Councillor Freeze. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freeze.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Frost, for that update. Yeah, just to add in terms of the consultation that's going on around Hamgate Avenue and the emergency double yellow lines that were on there, we are also doing the same along Church Road, the stretch between Hamgate Avenue and Latchmere Lane, because we have similar problems there, and continuing around the corner down towards Latchmere Close. We had very bad congestion along that area. I mean, a lot of that was to do during lockdown, but as Councillor Frost said, we are very aware that the Royal Parks are looking to bring in car parking charging into Richmond Park, and we know that it is a draw when there is free parking nearby. So we will be consulting on that. The letters will be going out during this autumn period. In addition to that, along Church Road, we have had one of the paths from Upper Ham Road down to St Andrew's Church repaved, not in an ideal substance. There were some complaints that it went into tarmac rather than into the initial to replace a similar surface. Unfortunately, that was due to cost, but there was an issue with safety. People were choosing not to walk on that path because it was very stony, and they were walking along the road instead, which was not a safe option, particularly as, unfortunately, despite there being 20 miles per hour across all roads in Richmond, that road people do choose to speed on. We also had the path repaved recovered between Church Road and Ham Farm Road, which is excellent because that hadn't been done for a long time, and as many of us know who are regular walkers and dog walkers, that path can get very muddy. So that's it on sort of paths. Couple of other things that we've been looking at. One is Ham Polo Club, which has been putting in applications for new equestrian tracks and new fencing around the club. We've been keeping a very close eye on that and calling in applications where need be, so that they can be determined at planning rather than having officers doing it. There has been a particular issue with getting rid of the last equestrian track, which actually was made of a lot of very small, tiny bits of plastic, and the Environment Agency and the council are now insisting that be disposed of properly. So that should be happening soon, and we will continue to keep an eye. There's a live application at the moment, and we are considering calling that in to make sure that it gets decided by committee rather than by officers. So we are keeping a close eye on all what's happening there. We've been getting a lot of requests for electrical vehicle charging points, and issues with the fact that in terms of driveways and paving over driveways so that you can put your electric vehicle on your driveway. There are issues with the width that the council will consider putting a drop curb on, so do check those before you pave over your driveway, because you may find, as unfortunately some residents have, that you do not meet the requirements of the council. At the moment, as people keep pointing out, there are only 4 electric vehicle chargers in the ward, which is not enough. We've been campaigning hard to get more. We've just been heard that we're going to get at least another 2, I think, on Simpson Road and Hardwick Road. I'm just getting that confirmed. They'll be installed this autumn, but we continue to ask for more because 6 in the ward is not enough for demand. So do keep putting in your requests. You can go online and request electric vehicle charging point near your home, so do please keep doing that, because the more requests the council gets, the more likely they are to put ones in their ward. And finally, Ham Close is an issue that keeps being raised, and there is continual consultation going on. There is a trip this Sunday out to a development by the same developers that you can go on if interested. Details of that should be on the RHP website. If you need them, do get in touch with any of the councils and we can share them with you. And then finally, there is a further consultation on the 19th and 20th of November at St Richard's Church for all residents to go and give their views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillors Frost and Freeze. The double act, names that you would normally associate with the winter period, but reminding us that there was a summer, although in my area of the country, I have to say, blink and you might have missed it, but nonetheless, thank you both very much. I'm sure people on the call will have questions of you, and as a reminder, if you want to ask a question of your councillors, then you do so by typing that question in the chat function, and as the evening goes on, I will pick that out and I will try and make sure we get through either all or certainly as many of the questions as we possibly can. So let's now turn to the main subject of the evening. Main subject of the evening is high streets, not just your high streets, but Britain's high streets. What on earth is going on Britain's high streets? Well, for as long as I've ever researched, going back many decades, high streets have faced a series of ups and downs, economic booms, economic recessions, changes. But I think it is fair to say that the changes that are going on now on Britain's high streets are unlike anything that has ever happened before. And although you may be seeing a very limited effect at the moment, other high streets up and down the country have been utterly devastated by what's gone on over the last 18 months or so. It is really having a profound effect on the buildings and their use and the types of businesses that can afford to successfully trade there. So even though there may be no high street emergency in your location, part of this evening is about thinking, as your high street does start to change and evolve, what are the sorts of things that you want to see it become? So let's give you a bit of context in terms of what's gone on, particularly in the last 18 months. There is a school of thought that says that what's happening on Britain's high streets today is a direct consequence of the COVID pandemic. You may have your own views. My view is that school of thought is utterly wrong. What is actually going on Britain's high streets today, in my view, was happening long before COVID. And what COVID managed to do was accelerate a process that was always going to reach this conclusion. We just got there much, much sooner than we may otherwise have done. So that is change, and it's not change for the good, it's change for the negative by and large. But actually, if you do look back at the last 18 months, what have we learned from that, and how can that influence what our high streets become? Well, I don't know about you, but 19 months ago, I would have struggled to have spotted my neighbour in a lineup in my town centre. I live my life in my house according to my own rules, and I didn't necessarily engage hugely in the wider community. And COVID has opened up my local community to me hugely, such that actually on every Thursday night at one point, I was standing on my doorstep, rattling pots and pans and clapping with my neighbours, celebrating our regional NHS. So we've come to reconnect with the local, we've come to value our local community, and we actually want our local to work, much more so than we did 19 months ago, when we were all quite content to buy on the internet, and if the shop survived, they survived. And we also now travel less, and that's likely to be something that will sustain itself, not just travel internationally, but actually we're staying very local, even when we're having time off work. So there's something really splendid and to celebrate our local communities, and we need to embed that in whatever the future of our high streets is. High streets became really about retail, didn't they? About transactions. We went to high streets to buy stuff, to pay money for stuff, to work, but it was about transactions. And what we do know is that as time moves on, retail is going to form a far lesser proportion of our high streets. Retailers already have started to reduce their footprint, and even though you may not experience this in your location, elsewhere large vacancies have started to open up. And that's about the cost of occupation. It's about the fact the consumer has changed and the consumer has started to buy more products online. It's about the fact that out of town retail has begun to balance out in-town retail. And it's about a whole combination of range of things. There's no one thing that is leading retailers necessarily to adjust their stock. And when you look at how people work, that definitely has been influenced and accelerated by COVID. So everybody is now talking, you may have noticed, about hybrid forms of working. We used to go to our workplace 5 days a week. It's likely that we won't be doing that 5 days a week. We may be working in our home or in our local community for part of the week and going to our remote desks for a lesser proportion of the week. What that means is that ongoing, people will be spending more of their time in their own localities, and that starts to mean they need different things from their shopping parades and from their high streets. What also has become more prevalent is that the homogenisation of high streets that was really, really prevalent pre-COVID has started to break down, and the power of that homogenisation is nowhere near as strong. So take brands like Iceland. They may take a listed building in one high street, they may have taken a brand new building in another, but actually when shop fitted, both would look the same. And actually points of difference are now much more important than sameness between high streets. And we need to celebrate those points of difference. And often those are our independent local businesses that operate only for us and only in our high streets. Residential trends at the start of COVID, do you remember? Everybody was going to flee the cities and live in the middle of countryside where they couldn't catch this horrible disease. And actually trends have reversed that completely, and particularly amongst the younger generation. There is now more demand to live close to large urban centres like London and Birmingham and Manchester than existed before the pandemic. And if people are wanting to move closer and they're going to live more locally, then actually the demands they have of their high streets is logically going to change. So none of that produces you with any answers, but it gives you a kind of national context as to what is going on, and those processes of change continue and are still underway. So there are some rules of engagement as we now move into the discussion section of this evening around what are your ideas for your high street. And one of the negatives of this sort of thing is if everybody thinks the convener of the conversation can solve all of the problems. And for us, the convener of the conversation is the council. Now, councils have a huge part to play. They can bring us together, they can demonstrate leadership, they can try and gain a consensus around a common set of principles and a plan for action for the future. But what they're not able to do is then go on and solve all the problems themselves. I mean, at a really headline level, let me explain why. Councils will own very few of the properties on and around your high street. You have private landlords, private owners that own the buildings. So actually the local authority can put in train a plan for the future, but you need to engage the owners of buildings to actually start to demonstrate that plan. So the council have a very important role here, and they have a crucial role in bringing us together, which they're doing, but we can't expect them to leave with our shopping list and slowly tick off the things that we suggest. That's a more collective experience. But this is very much about you. My role this evening is not to give you the answers, not to tell you what the council thinks, but to ask you for your views. And the commitment that I absolutely give you is that your views will be heard. So first of all, we're recording this evening's exercise. But secondly, I have a commitment from the councillors that once we've done all of the conversations across the various high streets, there will be a report that will go into the committee cycle, which will start to bring together some of those suggestions, and will start to deal with a plan for the future. So this really, really matters. Don't think this is somebody just listening and then they will ignore you. I promise you that is not the case. The process started with a conference that was held in May. And I was lucky enough to be at that conference, and I asked for what were the themes that came out of it. And that may help you to start to think about what's already been said in these conversations so far. 5 themes developed across Richmond's high streets as a whole. The first was that people wanted their town centres to act like destinations, to not be about transactions anymore, but to really appeal to the broader community, not just because of shopping, but because of public art performances, street cafes, and so on. So really attract us. no longer would we need to be on our high streets. Our high streets have to adapt so that we want to be on them. Number one. Number two, there was a call for the future of high streets to be dictated by what people wanted, a real people-focused approach. So high streets have to be well suited to the local user, walkable, pedestrianisation, green spaces, and so on. The third point was that we wanted our high streets to be more balanced in the future, recognising that retail may start to retrench to some extent, but let's be proactive about bringing in different kinds of uses, particularly civic uses, into spaces as they may in the future become vacant. The third point was for the local authority to be really creative about its approach to planning. And as we start to repurpose spaces, don't just think that one retail unit needs to be replaced by another retailer, but what other things should be on and around our high street. And then the fifth thing that came through strongly was we could all sit at home on our sofa and buy on Amazon, couldn't we? But actually the power of our mobile phone, that digitalization process, should be even more powerful when we're on our high streets. So high streets need to not compete with the digital market, they need to embrace it and take it a stage further. So hopefully that helps around the conversation. So this really does matter, and it features in your local plan exercise. And I'm no expert on local planning, but I know somebody who is, who's going to give you a run through of where tonight's event features in the long-term strategy for the Borough of Richmond in general. So let me introduce Grace, who's going to take us through that process.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'm just share my screen. Definitely not an expert, but I'll give you all a bit of an overview about how this fits in to some of the things that we are running in planning policy. So yeah, I'm here to just give you a quick overview of the local plan process. For those of you that don't know, I will explain what the local plan is and how conversations like this are going to feed into that development process. So the planning policy team produced the local plan, and we work with lots of other council departments to make sure that our decisions are informed and that we are successfully exploring the impact of things like new developments. This isn't only an internal process, and at several stages we'll be inviting our communities to take part, as we know how knowledgeable you all are in your own areas. And although, as Paul's mentioned, there are many things that are out of council control, we do also work with landlords and landowners to influence where future development is situated and what that looks like. But factors like land value and high demand for certain uses do influence planning policy, as well as things like the climate emergency and flood management. So the local plan is a legal document which is produced by each local authority in England. And basically what that is a set of guidelines which sets out our vision and objectives for the borough. The plan is often produced once every 10 years, but it's typically renewed every 5. Although in Richmond, we decided the next review should commence a bit sooner to reflect pressing issues like the climate emergency, changes to central planning policy from central government, and including responding to the new local plan that was published earlier this year, as well as the ambitious housing target that all boroughs are under pressure to deliver on. And essentially the local plan is balancing a complex set of needs. As I alluded to in the last slide, there's lots of different factors that need to be balanced as part of this policy to make sure it's fair and representative of everybody. And the local plan, in line with that statement, the local plan does not always adopt policies that are popular or that fall in line with individual interests. But we aim to make sure that the needs of all users, members of society and users of places are represented. So rather than dictate or operate specific jobs, services or community facilities, the plan aims to create the conditions for those businesses and services to thrive. The local plan does ensure that we are placing developments in the most appropriate places, shaping how places look and feel and influencing how we travel and get around. But it does not do things like cap property prices, reduce rents or resist change shops. It also can't control parking or how often waste and recycling is collected. And to give you an example of what this looks like in practice, or what some of these policies might mean day to day, I wanted to mention the 15 to 20-minute neighbourhood concept. And this is the idea, which has already been reflected in the conversation this evening, that our places should be complete, compact and well-connected neighbourhoods where you can get most things you need within a short walking distance or cycle. And that includes things like shopping, visiting events that you might want to attend, community services, local schools and health facilities. And as we've already said this evening, the pandemic's really highlighted how important it is to have these kind of services locally, and how much we can all gain from really connecting with and staying in our local area. So as well as the 5 larger centres in Richmond, we've also got around 30 local and neighbourhood centres and parades across the borough. And these are really important for things like top-up shopping, especially for residents or visitors who don't have a car or might be less mobile. So going forward, we need to make sure that we are setting our local centres and town centres up to be successful and distinctive, that we're responding to changes in the retail sector, things like online shopping, and responding to new use class legislation as well, which dictates, transferring high street units back to residential and vice versa. We also know that you know your local centres best, far better than we do. And we're very keen to hear your thoughts on this so we can incorporate your ideas and responses and reflections on your local area into the local plan. This is a very long process to develop the local plan. So I won't go into detail this timeline, but you can see that it's several years in the making. We're currently about here. You can see my arrow. The first draft of the local plan is currently being produced. And before we get to that point, there's been a lot of research in the background, building up an evidence base, commissioning new studies, such as an urban design study to help us understand where the realistic constraints and capacity for growth are, but also documents that anticipate future needs for housing, retail, leisure facilities, premises for businesses, and responding to things like the increased demand for co-working spaces as not so many people are travelling to offices. Yeah, so currently we're producing the first draft of the plan, which is called the Regulation 18 plan. And the consultation window for this is due to open in December 2021 and will run until the end of January next year. And this will be a further opportunity to input into the process, so do keep an eye out for that. And finally, just to end and summarise, the local plan sets out a long-term vision for Richmond, which is looking up to 15 years into the future, and is reflecting on some of the changes we've experienced, but also the ideas we have to kind of really celebrate and make our local centres thrive. We want to build on our borough's strengths as a place with strong arts, culture and leisure facilities that are enhanced by the unique presence of the Riverside, and we want to work with our communities and local partners to ensure this vision is developed with you. So I'll hand back over to Paul now. I'm very much looking forward to hearing all your ideas in the active session that we're about to go into. Thanks.
Well done, Grace, and well said. As Grace said, it is you, the residents and businesses, that know your area and your high street best. So now we need to ask you for your help. We need you to tell us about it, and we need you to help us plan for the future. We're going to ask you 3 questions. First of all, around the use of your town centre. Secondly, what you'd like to see on your high street. And thirdly, what are your ideas for the future? But before I flesh out those questions, let's watch a short video which might give you some more idea of what people are saying.
I think there's a fantastic mix of countryside, parks, shops, sense of local community in the area. So it's a nice place to spend some time.
Well, it's a really green area. The neighbourhood's really friendly. You've got everything pretty much near your doorstep. So it's close to Kingston, but also close to Richmond. So it's just in between. And the schools are great. So the kids go to school locally and we've settled really, really well. So we're happy with the area generally. Yeah.
And the atmosphere so beautiful. The house, kids' gardens, nice high street, hardware shop, which is you can't find anywhere.
There used to be greengrocers here, there used to be Bridges here, but things change. I noticed that there's a new greengrocers, a new delicatessen opening up. So what's really good about Ham Parade is that there's lots of independence here. There's you know, it's not just the standard high street which you get in every high street ever.
If we have some some services, I mean, like banks and things like that in the high street, for people to come into the road more than these kind of more than the shop.
I think a few more benches, you know, for people to sit on and enjoy the neighbourhood. I think that's really nice.
I reckon they could have a few more activity things down there. There's a lot of greenery, a lot of wasteland. I think they could do a lot with.
Maybe a play centre locally, although there's loads of parks generally, but something indoors. There's the pottery place just down the road on this parade. Just a bit of variety would be good for kids.
So there you go, some ideas there that you might agree with, you might disagree, you might have others of your own. So in about a minute's time, we're going to move you into 4 breakout rooms. Each will be facilitated by a council officer, but this is your chance to have your say. So let's go through those questions again. The first thing you will be asked is, how do you use your town centre? Has that changed? How often do you use it? What do you use it for? Do you now visit more or less frequently? Do you visit at different times of the day? How do you get there? And when you visit, what do you use? The second question is, we'd like to know what you'd like to see on your high street that might improve it. You might be 100% happy. You might say nothing can be improved. It's absolutely perfect. Or alternatively, you might have some ideas around, I don't know, green spaces, different shops, leisure amenities, cycle lanes, and so on. And thirdly, importantly, be positive. What's your big ideas? What would you really like to see there in 5-10 years' time? Now, the rules of the game are this. We do want you to be positive. We want you to be realistic, but we want you to be incredibly constructive. We want your views now. So you're going to have half an hour in 3 rooms. I'll flip between the rooms and then I'll do my best to consolidate the findings at the end. Best of luck. Enjoy yourself.
Paul, before you move into breakout rooms, can I just confirm, you've been talking about town centre. Now, you're actually referring to Ham Parade, aren't you? Because I think people might think town centre, or that might be Richmond Town Centre or Kingston Town Centre.
Your local high street.
Yeah, thank you.
Your local high street. Right, okay, let's split people into their 4 rooms. Best of luck. Right, everybody, well done. As if by magic, not just did you disappear, but you've appeared again and you've arrived back safely. I joined all of the rooms for various bits of your sessions, and it was really interesting, actually. We got off to a bit of a slow start this evening, but then in the end, my goodness, you sort of on the final lap, you galloped past every other one of these I've done and came up with a whole host of ideas. Amazing. Right, so I'm not going to allocate these ideas to any one individual person or group. I'll just read them through as I came across them, and they are not representative. This is my grab from those sessions. Okay, so whilst people were saying we haven't got many vacancies, some shops have been lost and we need to think about how we use those areas in the future. One person said there really are too many service providers. Estate agents, why do we need them to take up space on the high street? Convenience was the key to somebody else, and lots of people in lots of the group said they missed the banks. Street markets were crucial, and the idea for a gym and a cinema was felt to be important. Food was important, and they never bought anything else, this person, other than eat and drink on the high street. Socialising was important to another, and another said we want less traffic. One person said that they used Richmond and Kingston, but felt that the connection between their high street and Richmond was not good enough and orientated more towards Kingston, which is something that generally the borough perhaps needs to watch out for. Lack of vacant units to another person was a problem because they had lots of ideas as to what they wanted to bring on the high street, but not the space to do it. Somebody else wanted covered areas for weather. A group said that crime was an issue. And another said they wanted shops to be open on Sundays and in the evenings. Better bins and safer bike racks came through. More services from another, such as hardware, pharmacies, vets, hairdressers, they all serve you very well. And another person said, I don't shop on the high street, but I love to eat and drink there, and I'd love to see more independent restaurants. Somebody else in another group said, though, that when they ate and wanted to go out and eat and drink for something really special, they admitted they wanted to go to Richmond or Kingston rather than their local independent food store. There was huge chat in one group about the best pub in the area, and Ham Parade's independent bookshop got a real shout out. Jumping in the river was discussed by another group. Another said, we want a cafe in the Tesco's unit, and there was a discussion about, when I'm there, I want to stay longer, but the lack of toilets makes that difficult. Somebody else talked about beautifying the area with everything from greenery, trees, benches and water fountains. And somebody else was saying reroute the cars, but was warned by another resident, don't take the cars away, because actually they do bring in vital people, particularly builders, going to Greggs on their way to work. Let's use wider footpaths better. Let's try and invest in bike deliveries to home, not cars and motorbikes. And another said there wasn't enough to do in the evenings. But I want to finish on 2 points. The first was a really lovely comment from one person in one group, who I won't name, who said, I love living here and I feel I've got a responsibility to make this area better for the future. And then talking about the future, Mr. Walker, if you're there, your son made more sense than you. Mr. Walker's son took over from Mr. Walker and said, oi, there are not enough spaces for young people. I want gaming areas, I want community spaces, and I want to hang out. A councillor tried to debate with Mr. Walker's son that there were community areas and he could find them. But Mr. Walker's son said, but you're telling me about it now, but I only pick up information on my mobile phone, and you've failed to tell me about it through that device. Digitalisation on the high street. Okay, well done everybody, particularly Mr. Walker's son, you were an absolute star. So let's move to the chat section then, and this is your chance to ask of your councillors anything that you might want to ask. So let me start to scroll through some of the comments we've got so far, and please free type anything, and I promise you I will pick up these comments. I think the 2 councillors that are going to answer our questions again are councillors Frost and Freeze. So if the 2 of you could come off mute and be ready, I'll ask you independently the questions as we go. Let me come to you first, Councillor Freeze, if you could come off mute. Lots of talk about how the council could help to attract more pubs, more food, more drink replacement for restaurants. Is that process underway, or could the council do more?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think that is something that we could probably do more on. It's not something that's been raised with me or any of the other councillors, as far as I know, in terms of bringing more things locally. That's a very good point. I can't say any more than that I will have to find out what's going on, and I will talk to the council and see what we can do. Maybe Penny or Gareth have more insight, but I'm not sure. Hopefully they don't.
Okay, anything to add, Councillor Frost? Have we lost Councillor Frost?
No, I mean, I just said I haven't got anything to add, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Anything to add?
I just said I haven't got anything to add.
Sorry, we didn't. That was the vital bit, Councillor Frost, that I didn't hear. Okay, so let me ask you then another question, which is coming from Anne Kay. What do you feel, Councillor Frost, are the 3 top priorities for the post-pandemic development of Richmond?
Of Richmond itself, Richmond. The whole council. I think that that's the tricky one, because we are Ham, Petersham, Richmond Riverside. So, I mean, my brief is really to talk about our particular ward rather than to have a wider discussion. So I'm going to talk about my local ward, and the things that I would like to see are the opportunity for having more mental health facilities available to our young people, because I think that is such an enormous pressing situation, and I think that that we have got a lot of potential there with Breakout School hosting the off the record as a sort of an off the record counselling service there. We've got the Ham Youth Centre and the things which they are offering, and they are really doing some quite sterling work. we've got within our ward. I mean, we've got so much open space, so let's see us using it as well as we possibly can, because we've got a lot of opportunities for enabling young people and older people to get involved with conservation activities, to learn more about our local area, and how we can be contributing to green issues, and to try and stop some of the worst effects of climate change through better use of our green spaces. That's two. I think I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, that's fine. And actually on that final point, I can say from my brief visit to all 4 rooms, that came up in all 4 rooms. Councillor Freeze, you're then, let's turn to you. Now you've got an easy option here, Councillor Freeze. You can either just agree with your colleague, or you can come up with something completely different. What would be your top priorities? Let's go for 2, not 3, so that we don't sort of outbid each other. Your top priorities for your ward.
I'd really like to see, well, okay, we know that people stopped using their cars so much, and there was a big issue, there was a big reduction in air pollution across the country during that time. I'd love to see that being maintained, and we do have an issue in the borough that we have some of the highest car ownership in London, and we need to really find ways to reduce car ownership and to support much more walking and cycling. We do have really high usage, high cycling in the borough, but I also know that a lot of that comes from the clubs. And one of the things that keeps being raised with councillors is the really unpleasant behaviour of cyclists of a particular type being abusive to residents. So that's one thing I'd like to see, is to try and reduce the clash of road users and public realm users, so we can have better space for people walking and cycling, which is safer, and for active transport. Penny, I mean, I can't remember if Penny actually meant, I think she mentioned youth facilities, but one of the things we just talked about was the need for better youth facilities. And there is the BMX track, but I'd love to see a proper basketball court in the area, and we do have a somewhat underused football place outside Beaufort Road, which I don't know what we obviously talked to residents about it, but that's an area there that we could look at doing something with. And finally, I'm not a third point, but I'm going to bring in Councillor Richards, because he is here, and I do think, I'm sure he wants to give his input to this question and any others. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Richards, you've got 30 seconds to give me your 2.
Yeah, I think change is coming. It might not be the change that everybody wants, is what I would say, because there are big changes coming with decarbonisation, which are gonna hit everybody, and active travel and better public transport is what I'd like to see in
okay, can I just push you on that question, because what and a couple of the groups when I was in it were saying was that they absolutely understood the need for active travel and the need to improve air quality. No issue with that. They completely accepted it. But to remove cars from the area would actually destroy some of the businesses. So are you saying that actually we need to move along the environmental route more aggressively, and the businesses in the end will have to adapt? Or can you see a more sort of balanced role between the car, the cyclist, the pedestrian, and so on? What are you saying?
Well, I think it doesn't really matter what policies we pursue. Is that reduction of car ownership is coming. It's the young people don't own cars, and they will be coming here by public transport and by bike and walking. We have to adapt and support that change. If we don't facilitate it, then we're just making the roads more dangerous, and we're supporting killing people. So yeah, we want to get ahead and make the roads safer now, so that there'll be more active travel in the future.
Okay, now I'm not going to give all of these questions to all of you, so let's go back to Councillor Frost. Councillor Frost, Simon Kavanagh wants to know, what, if anything, do we think we can learn from Teddington, which has recently become the winner of the best place to live in London?
Well, I suspect that Teddington gets on very well with its with whoever's been writing those the reviews in the newspapers. But
so you think it's not a fair poll, or you do think Teddington's?
I mean, if you think about Teddington, you think about their high street, and they've got a quite a remarkable array of independent shops, and a lot of clothes shops as well, which we don't have any of. But they've got they've got a much bigger stretch of shopping area. And they've got a good range of cafes, and a pub down the end. So I'm sure it is a lovely place. And it's also probably second only to Islington as being about one of the most expensive areas to buy property in. And I think I very much picked up what Howard said about how when he came, and it's the same for me, when we came to Ham, it was because the housing was affordable. And is it still affordable, or are we pricing out all the sort of the young people just starting out? And I think that is a really significant error on our part. And I would put that back to Simon Kavanagh to say, let's have a bit more social housing so that we can actually have more families who are not able to afford to buy in the area. So
the dangerous line between improvement and gentrification is where you're at, and that's you're quite right. That is a risk, and it's been seen elsewhere. Councillor Freeze, it comes up time and time again, even in the questions, and it came up in two of the groups who personally I felt debated it for far too long, but that was it was important to them, which is the lack of toilets. Sorry, Councillor Freeze, you're on mute.
Yes, toilets is an issue, and all three councillors have campaigned with our MP to get Rich Royal Parks to reopen the toilets at Hamgate, which they have refused to do, which is really frustrating. I do want to just say that the New Inn is part of the community toilet scheme, so that is open for those who want to use it, although that is a bit further away from the parade itself. There are toilets in at least one of the cafes, possibly two on the parade, but that's not the same as having a public toilet that's open all the time. However, given the lack of funds there are available for such things, I would imagine getting a toilet open on the parade all the time is never going to happen. But what we could do is certainly I can talk with the council, and certainly Siobhan is here as our community officer. I know we could have a chat with a couple of the businesses on the parade and say, will you become actually part of the community toilet scheme? In fact, I'm just remembering, I'm sure Costa Cafe's got a toilet, Studio 432 has got a toilet, so that's at least two directly on the parade that have got toilets and are open generally during the day. Obviously not on Sunday and evenings, but I would say I don't think we're that underrepresented in toilets on the parade itself. Yes, Amandine as well. So there's at least three.
Good. Okay, let's move back to the subject of cars. Lots of debate and response to the councillors' views on car ownership and car usage. Mr. Chester particularly saying perhaps not representative. We're going to turn to a question by Andy Scott. Andy Scott says, actually, there is a middle route here, which is electric cars. But you can't charge an electric car on the high street. So can the council develop a plan, please, so that you can? Councillor Richards.
We're bringing in some, well, at the moment, we're reliant on third-party contractors to bring in, to build these charging points. So they have to want to come to Ham, and at the moment they don't seem that inclined to build a charging network here.
Okay,
so we may have to change some of the streets around to have the lampposts on the side of the pavements in some places, rather than at the back of the pavements, to support a charging network, which I know council officers are reluctant to do, because changing things around in the street costs serious money. So yeah, that's something for the future.
Okay,
Well,
so
we could look.
let me give you another view then from Michael Walker, who's actually purchased an electric car and says that his electric car could actually end up as a deterrent from going to his local high street, because the only place he can charge it is at home. Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I think that the problem of the lack of charging points in Ham and Petersham, it actually came up at the council on Tuesday evening, and somebody raised a question about this, and apparently there's a particular problem in Ham and Petersham because of where our lampposts are, because they have because they're sited at the wrong end of our grass verges or something. So that might be one of the reasons why we are so underdeveloped here for electric car charging points. And we really do need to sort of get moving on this, because there are many people who would be prepared, especially now with the issue with petrol, who would be prepared to move into purchasing electric cars. But there is also a further issue about why do we need so many cars? Because when I first came to Ham, you could park up and down the road. It wasn't an issue. Now you've got same number of units of housing, but you've got, people, maybe 3 car owners living in one unit of housing. Do we need all those cars? I think we really need to ask ourselves that question very seriously.
I'm actually going to bring in one of the attendees. Mr. Chester, can you come off mute for me? And would you do me a favour and make the point to the entire crowd that you've made about the inadequacy of charging for electric vehicles? Because I know you feel strongly about this.
Yeah, we've got precisely 4 lamppost charging points in Ham, and if you compare that with somewhere like Kew or Barnes that have got numerous lamppost points, and they've also got the higher powered on-street charging points. Riverside Drive, which goes all the way around the circuit of the borders Ham all the way around the estates, has most of its lampposts next to the road, which, and it also doesn't have much parking compared with all the other streets because there aren't houses there. That's an area that could be developed for lamppost charging. I don't really accept Councillor Richard's point that we're in the hands of commercial interests on this. I'm sure that if the case were put to the likes of the Shell network, for example, it doesn't go under the Shell name, it goes under a different name. I can't recall what it is at the moment. They would be prepared to put charging points on the high street, certainly. I just think this needs pressing with the other interested parties.
Needs to be given a great priority. Thank you very much, Howard. Councillor Freeze, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that Councillor Frost and I have raised the concept of putting electric charging points down the lampposts on Riverside Drive. I'm desperately trying to search through my emails to find out what was the reason given for why that was not possible, because we have been told it is not possible. We have all raised, and we are very, very frustrated at the lack of infrastructure for electric vehicles in our ward. I've raised it at full council. Penny, Gareth and I have all emailed and spoken to all the council officers. We continue to raise it and we are pushing it very, very hard. As I've said, there is a way to request charges on the website. I will maybe Siobhan or one of the other officers can actually find that and put the link in the chat so you all have it there. The more requests that we get, the more likely we are to get these charges.
Yeah, the reason it was turned down was specifically picking up the Councillor Richards's point. It was because the commercial suppliers said, Riverside Drive, not enough people live there, and they weren't interested in pursuing it. So it literally is, we're in that situation.
Sure. Okay.
But it's not something we're unaware of, and we are really trying very hard to push on it. But we will again after this meeting. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, okay. I think that's really good, and I think you'll see when you see the notes from the evening, it comes through in all 4 groups, and clearly in the chat it comes through very strongly. So listen, we are out of time. It's 8 o'clock. We could have gone on all evening. We're not able to do that because we all want to go and eat and drink something, I suspect. Can I just thank everybody for attending, particularly the councillors for taking the questions in the way you have. I'm most grateful. To everybody that's contributed to the discussion, thank you so much. Your ideas will not be ignored. They will be collated. And as I told you earlier, they will form part of the committee process. Your time has been well received. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for attending. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
No.